guest is a real treat for all of us. Directly from Toronto, Canada, one of my favorite cities in the world, we have M Erlendson joining us. M is a transformation engineer lead at Software AG, working with top companies around the world to build and scale process-driven business solutions. He brings a diverse background and unique perspective to each engagement, drawing upon years of experience in management consultant, business and enterprise architecture, project management, and as a successful entrepreneur. JM also has a passion for public speaking and performance, seen frequently at industry conferences and on tour as an international recording artist. So you don't know what you're going to get here. You may actually get a bit of a show going on. So JM, real pleasure to have you with you. Thanks for taking the time to share your expertise and insights with all of us.
Jose, thank you so much for having me, and thank you so much to everyone for joining us today. Today I'm going to be sharing a little bit of my thoughts on what's been happening in process mining, and particularly helping to explain one of the terms that I really hold dear when we talk about process mining, which is the bimodality of process mining. I'll explain that to you today, go through some of the scenarios one might use it for, and ultimately help you understand how it can get value for you and your organization. So we see a lot of challenges running the business right now, running businesses, particularly data-driven businesses. People are being forced to challenge to change based on industry requirements or being competitive and being able to keep up with technology as it evolves. But that change can't happen without leveraging insights from your running business. And so as you're trying to change, you're also trying to figure out what you're doing right now. And that means you're kind of changing the tires as you're driving the car. You're evolving your business as you're running your business, as you're evolving your business. And that requires an ability to understand how you're doing, where you're struggling, and what you can do to make it better. And that happens in a couple of different ways. Process mining as a core component is the overarching sort of umbrella that covers this, but different details will help you get into exactly where value can be found and understand and split how you're going to get that value based off of what you have available and the kind of outcomes you're looking to achieve. Because we understand that a real process transformation does require a life cycle, a movement of information and effort between different phases you're going to use. Now, the conventional design, implement, execute idea of sort of process modeling has been successful for organizations looking to transform, but it's been based off of a combination of soft skills-based decision-making, so not really data-driven, or strategic initiative-based decision-making, which is good, but it's focused more on executive alignment rather than on actual data outcomes. And now we're moving to a culture and trying to shift it to this measure first. But you see the idea that when you measure first with things like process mining and analytics, you also want to have the life cycle of checking back and being able to understand what those measurements mean. So checking conformance, simulating process changes so you can understand how you might actually achieve those business goals, and then understanding and analyzing the impact of those changes. And that whole life cycle happens in two different ways, which we're going to talk about today in bimodality. Now, for those of you who've been following along, we know that executed processes, they leave trails. And those trails are things we can follow that help us better understand what's happening, those traces that we can see, oh, is it happening in a different way? Is there a variation that's occurring? Is this something that we can learn from as an organizational piece of capital, or is this a non-compliance that we need to find ways to engineer out or train out? The difference is we want to take that and use that to populate and understand what your process actually is as models. So one of the things we think about a lot in process mining is not just that we want to take a look at the data, but we want to build a knowledge repository out of that data. So let's start at the idea of digital twins. Before we get into truly the bimodality of process mining, we're trying to build a representation of a business reality. And that knowledge repository has to represent the real world that's ongoing. But to see that real world, in conventional ways, we've done these sort of time and motion studies and things like that, or business discoveries. Instead, we want to represent and understand how system software sees it and what sort of system software supports are actually executing processes in the real world. And we'll grab event logs from those system softwares and be able to get discovery of the processes, understand how processes match up with our expectations, and how we can make things better to really get a true digital twin of reality. because ultimately we want to end up populating this best practice knowledge repository, this sort of source of truth for how you're going to move forward. Process mining is really one step in your journey, the end of which, of course, is improvement. And to do that, we want to understand how you designed it, how you implemented it, and how it's actually running, and where those don't match up. You can only really improve what you can measure. And so let's start with getting our digital twin. And that digital twin comes with a couple of different things we need to make sure we have. First and foremost is process mining integrated through this entire idea. First and foremost, you start off with gathering data and turning it into modeling. And then modeling turning into dashboarding, and dashboarding turning into actions, and actions turning into implementation. And with all those put together, we're able to get a much better picture of what we have, where we're struggling, what we should do in the future. Now the question is, how do we get information in? What kinds of things do we need to be successful with process mining? And that's where grouping it into a giant bucket of this is process mining is simply not sufficient to help you really achieve your goals, because they're not just one at a time. They're actually a couple of different things. So what is the bimodal of process mining? Well, that means there are two different things we're going to compare and contrast, and those two modes serve different purposes. They come about as a result of having different sets of information, and ultimately they're able to go through this life cycle in different ways. Mode one is what I consider agile process mining. It's something that you can think of as taking simple sets of data or simple single source sets of data and turning that into quick wins, quick insights, quick sets of data. For instance, taking a CSV file and turning it into a visualization of a process. Now, mode one process mining is generally something you'll find early on in the evolution of an organization's journey into process mining, where you'll get transaction logs, sort of ETL style, where you'll be able to simply extract them from your major transactional system, sort of one at a time. And your scope of project and process improvement is going to be restrained sort of to the ability to improve what you're seeing right now in this one place. We see this a lot in single improvement projects or continuous improvement initiatives, where different teams take the initiative to go after one problem at a time. The scope also tends to be restricted to sub-processes or single thread processes. It doesn't tend to look at an enterprise end-to-ends, because the reason, for a particular reason, is a lot of organizations do move through multiple systems, multiple sources, and enterprise end-to-ends tend to have longer turnaround times that you're going to want to analyze. Agile process mining is very good for, particularly for fast running, frequent processes as well. Those things tend to give you really good sets of data that you can respond to quickly. So think about mode one, agile. Mode two is strategic. We're looking at disparate sets of data that are usually located or stored or sort of housed inside systems that you'll have to go into to extract that data from. And it's about sort of continuous improving or ongoing issues, end-to-end processes. We're looking at much larger sets of data, much longer periods of time, and often much more sources of information. Mode two, and the reason I call it strategic is because those kind of changes aren't the sort of one at a time process improvements you'll see that can get you a quick ROI. Those are things that give you a strategic transformation capability where process mining can help you, pivot major end-to-end processes, significantly change the way in which you improve your customer relationships, the way you interact with your customers. They can do major transformational initiatives around product delivery. These sorts of things tend to give you massive ROI and huge enterprise capability, but they demand a lot more from you. And I feel like a lot of organizations and people think of process mining as this one big block, or even if not, they think of it as a spectrum. But when you think of it in bimodality, you can understand more quickly, A, what you want to get to out of this process of process improvement, and B, what you're going to have to provide to get the things you need. In this case, agile process mining requires substantially less to get started, but delivers less, but it delivers less in context. That allows you to sort of build on quick wins, see that ROI, and use it for smaller transformations, scaling up to larger transformations. We're trying to answer questions with process mining. A perfect example is orders are changed, they get blocked and rejected. How do we maximize touchless sales orders? So now we're going to use process mining to look at a single system, maximizing those zero-touch orders. And this is sort of our mode 1 kind of thing. I'll go into a Salesforce or into like a single, like an Ariba system, one system, and grab an ETL, sort of like it's an extract of a list of transactions that occurred, when they occurred, who did them, and literally just a set of things. And then I'm going to get some immediate insights, not only to how the process went, but how the process changed over time, over different possible executions, and see all those variants. So this, how do we maximize those zero-touch orders? Well, first we'll start by looking at the data set and saying, what are the different ways that it happened? This sort of single data set, the single initiative of analysis. We're also going to understand what happened most frequently. So what are people thinking is the standard, and how do different variants impact KPIs that we care about in this small data set? The next thing we're going to figure out is where those KPIs are exceeding our targets. And so this is part of when you combine sort of the agile mining with your goals and the goal achievement settings you're trying to figure out with your organization. You say, I'd like to take this initiative to decrease its value by a certain amount. So let's say I want to reduce my touch, the amount of time that I spend in touch sales orders by 20%. This is a particular one sort of thread thing. I've got a clear mandate, a clear goal, and now I'm going to go and find things that exceed that number and find those long-running processes. Now this, once again, this sort of mode 1, we're still moving pretty quickly, but we're able to now get a set of variants that are no longer acceptable and try to look into root causes of those variants. And we'll talk about that when we take a look at data. But data, sort of the optional extras in the data, are going to help us to discreetly identify conditions by which those orders are resulting as bad. And in sort of this mode 1 of Agile, we can quickly get to a root cause, or at least a tentative root cause, and start moving towards solutions. And one of those solutions is establishing and maintaining a happy path. So not only are we saying, here's how we respond to challenges, but we're also starting to create organizational collateral. So mode 1, you've started to get these process models that are now your golden standard. We have decided, based on the information we have and the KPI outcomes, that this process flow is what we want to have for this particular process. I can publish that, I can make it available to a larger number of consumers, and I can give them the resources they need to implement that over and over again, not just in a single location, but across the organization. Because now I've established best practices. And now I can use that as a mechanism of encouraging change and other projects elsewhere to increase the value that I get from this single mode 1 exercise. So while mode 1, once again, is a smaller scope, it does have the capacity to scale, particularly when you're looking at taking best practices and pushing them out to a larger consumer group. Now, the mode 2 is something like a perfect example. How can we harmonize our sales process globally? What are the differences to today? So that's where I would look at actual execution across a variety of systems, all the possible executions in those different spaces. I would look at it across geographies, between different data sources. And this is where I'm not looking at getting a CSV file as an extract to sort of put into my process mining tool. This is when I'm looking into hooking into actual process mining, from process mining into real systems. That's when we're taking a look at things like, taking web queries that come out, or hitting against data tables for true integration into those systems. Because not only am I talking about this from a once sort of looking at it as a snapshot, but I'm also going to want to go and do this over a long period of time. Harmonizing and standardizing the sales order process could take us a very long time. It could be a transformation that would go on over a series of months or even years to sort of harmonize this. And we want to keep a steady track of what's going on over time. And then once we've started to reach a steady state, we can continue to use process mining as a strategic tool to monitor how the execution is going and keep compliance back against those different business units to adhere to the standards that we've decided. And that's when we talk about conformance checking and anomaly detections. That's where process mining in mode 2, this sort of strategic view, ends up being sort of like a BI tool in some capacity. It's not real time. That's not what process mining is intended to be, but it's relatively real time. It's as real as you need it to be. And let me explain that. The velocity of change and the velocity of execution, if you're doing an order and your orders are happening, let's say you have a lead time on an order of, let's say 72 hours. You don't need information to be updated every second and a live real-time dashboard. If it was updated every minute or every 10 minutes or every hour or even every 4 hours, that would be relatively real-time because it's close enough. The changes within your process aren't happening fast enough to make the next best action have to happen sooner than the latest refresh of data. And so this is where we take this and take a mining exercise, an improvement exercise, and turn it into an ongoing support and improvement exercise. So conformance checks go back and look to see, are people executing the processes as in different locations as per the decided standards we've put out for ourselves. And so that's where we take a process model and we compare it to the process execution discovery. So we say, hey, are you doing steps in the wrong order? Are you missing a step? Are you adding a step we didn't expect? And we can see that in dashboards and different sorts of analytics that help you to emerge out, A, what you have to do, B, where it's working and not working, and C, how you can get better at this. And so that's sort of the ongoing exercise of learning and development that's going to go out to your different teams. This could be an exercise of geographical specificity and re-engineering for different areas. This could be an idea of enterprise transformation, architecture transformation. Perhaps you look through the mining and one of your systems that's providing data, you can see that this is one of the sources of challenge for your organization. Well, perhaps you should be looking at finding ways of either changing your business logic and rules in that system or going through a transformation and a system landscape upgrade to help meet your business needs. And then the next question is, how does it happen? Well, when we talk about mode 1, this is something that's a little bit simpler. Mode 1 is once again getting sets of data that are just literally flat exports usually that give us really fast insights. And so we talk about activity tables as a core piece of the puzzle. And whatever system you're using for transactions, whatever automation system or whatever business rules engine you have, I guarantee you have some form of activity table that you can pull out where it covers what the case IDs are. So as in focusing on, these are the process executions that happen, and we're sort of labeling them. This is an order X, order Y, order Z. And then things that happen. So activity names are really important for us to understand the steps that occurred, and all these systems will be able to produce something like that. And then timestamps. Note that I did put only the start timestamp as a mandatory thing, because in mode 1 and in sort of agile process mining, one of the things we can't be is we can't be choosers, because we're trying our best to move quickly and get whatever data we have. So a lot of systems, we can try and ask for more information than we need and slow down our agile process transformation in mode 1. So activity start is really all you need. You can sort of interpolate what happened. You can look at throughput time rather than single activity time. There's lots of ways we can get around having to have both activity start and end, although that of course is ideal. Having both means I can get a look at individual step time plus interstitial time, which is a useful tool to say how much are we waiting for people to be available for the next step to occur. But if you don't have that, that's totally fine. The next piece, we recommend the end timestamp we talked about, and we also recommend additional activity data. In this example, I've got executed by. One of the things we talk about sometimes in process mining is something we call interaction analysis. And so interaction analysis means which people interacted with which process steps to achieve this goal. And that helps us to break down, for instance, down from like organizations, what you can score and gamify how an organization is doing based off of the people and their allocation to roles and ultimately organizational units. Or if you want to get very big brother, interaction analysis does allow us to go executor by executor, who is performing well, who is performing slowly in their daily tasks. A lot of folks don't want to have that conversation. I understand it, but just to say that that kind of information and decomposition can exist if you have a recommended set of data like the additional activity data. The other part of mode 1 is if we can be both beggars and choosers, we can enhance our tables with more information. And this is where you grab whatever is available to establish two things. We call them measures and dimensions. So a dimension is something by which we can categorize the process that you are seeing in front of us. Perfect example is the purchase organization, the product category, the vendor country. These are additional dimensions which we can actually set as different filters to see how things are performing are there root causes we can analyze and get out associated with one of these dimensions? And if so, we can hone in on that and say, oh, we're seeing that the KPI here, we're not meeting our SLA, and the dimension we're finding that happening mostly on is a certain product category, like office supplies. We aren't able to ship our office supplies as quickly as we want. What's going on with this? Let's delve into that. Let's use this sort of agile analysis to immediately get a quick hint as to where we can look next. So once again, mode one, so you're at this point in time, you're getting small sets of data, you're getting whatever you can from whatever is available, and you're turning it together into something that can move quickly. Mode two is a little different. Mode two, we're pulling from this variety of application systems and getting it as a set of data. So we're pulling these single events, single instances that occurred, and we're aligning them. So the first piece of the puzzle is we're collecting all this information, and you're going to, in mode two, it's a lot less transparent to the executor. So if you're, for instance, if you're doing process mining activities as somebody who's a process professional, you're not going to see as much that mode two is happening because it's a lot of direct integration. So you're not like loading Excel files into a tool, but they're going to pull a series of steps. And then this is perhaps the most important one. We're going to have to key all of those steps to those process instances or those case IDs I talked about earlier, but that keying may be harder because you've got different systems. So one of the things we needed, particularly in mode two, is we need a master key between system to system. So the air waybill number in this system is keyed to our shipping number in that system. And that sort of keying file allows us to take those and actually align these process instances to their groups. And then we can take that timestamp information and sort it, like we talked about before in mode one. But that keying, that second step is something that takes us a little bit more time in mode two, which is why I say mode two is more of a strategic view. It's not the sort of agile movement of information, but the benefit and the value of mode two can be substantially higher. It takes more investment and it takes more of a strategic and sort of executive will to achieve. So we're correlating end-to-end process steps across sources and making mode two happen. And both of those give us really good outcomes. We're able to move quickly and make small improvements, or we're able to see overall views that let us get to real strategic transformation. And the different use cases we want to recognize apply to different types of views. So we want to take a look at a process discovery view. So I said this at the beginning, and it's important to recognize that one of our outcomes for these modes is, both modes actually, is to end up with some mechanism of process discovery. We want to build these into a model that we can do something with. I always tell that story that process mining without business process modeling is like buying a car with only 2 tires. You're only going to get halfway there. And sure, you can probably drive it and screech it along as you get to where you want to go. But the truth is you're missing half the puzzle, which is executing on that improvement. So you want to get the process discovery, you want to build it into models. The next is you want to check those models back. So for instance, in the case of mode 2, you want to check back against how you expected things to go. So if you have a process modeling tool in place, you're all set. If you don't, what we do is we do a discovery, then we do a transformation, then we do a rediscovery and talk about that in a strategic capacity. And the third is enhancement. You want to get those 3 different things out of process mining. If you can't get all 3, then you're missing something. This enhancement relies on KPIs and thresholds and business goals. And both mode 1 and mode 2 have enhancement capacity. Mode 1 is very target oriented, and mode 2 is something that's more of a strategic transformation oriented. So you're seeing where your strategic weaknesses are, and then you can check back through the same sort of process as conformance. Did I achieve my strategic targets? And in the process enhancement. And that's where we talk about process improvement. That's that life cycle we're looking to do. So getting all those pieces in place is really important, because ultimately we're trying to support business transformation. We're trying to provide transparency, which is crucial to helping your transformation come to life, and keeping all your stakeholders informed, keeping them involved in the process. We're trying to help with shaping to build documentation, structured documentation that helps to inform and educate and enable your team, and ultimately to engage with the business, to engage with your customers, to engage with the transformation that you're trying to achieve. And that helps to give your process mining real sticking value in the organization. And that's where you take something like a mode 1 success, where you're able to get some agile processes to show some quick wins in process mining and turn that into the onus for executive support for a mode 2 approach. Because ultimately we're trying to help you, and process mining is trying to help you, depending on who you are or who you report to. It's giving you the resources you need to achieve strategic targets. So how do we do that? Well, let's say you're part of the operational excellence team. You're a CEO, you're part of the BPA team, you're part of the compliance team. Our challenge is we want to provide transparency for reliable decisions. So we want to identify these underperforming processes, want to figure out why, and be able to improve those processes. Or in compliance, we're trying to figure out why are people not doing what they said they would do. There are some legal and regulatory risks that they're introducing as a result of that, but also just in general, if you're non-compliant to a golden standard, there's a reason why people put that golden standard out, and it's because they thought that it would be a better way of doing things. We want to provide that insight to you. So what do? We give you visibility, and we allow you to adapt your processes as a blueprint for execution, because this bimodal mining is going to give you the visibility of what you need to do, the information you need to be able to use it, the models you need to be able to transform, and the ability to implement those models in the organization's systems. And then ultimately check back to make sure that that's achieved. And so whether or not you roll up under the CEO, whether or not you roll up under compliance, those are going to help you achieve those goals and help you meet your challenges and exceed the things that are put against you. Conversely, let's say you're trying to actually get money and achieve chief savings, meet your chief KPI targets. Maybe you're part of the CFO's office. Or let's say we have a outstanding invoice. We have cash that's stuck in outstanding invoice. We have days unbilled outstanding, those sorts of things. That's going to be a target that's levied against you. You want to get that money out of those outstanding invoices and free up that cash flow. Or let's say you're the COO and you're trying to roll out best practices. You know that there's money to be saved in this, but you need to be able to convince people to make changes. Well, let's give you a dashboard. Let's give you ways of communicating in the fashion that people can understand and accept. And that means that you're able to take that information and share it with people and be able to build in this kind of proof to your various business units to overcome resistance to change and take process mining outputs and turn them into real transformation capabilities. So you want to, we're going to show you this and be able to show you where you're minimizing overdue balances, calculating that blocked cash, give you visibility to that and allow you to take action on it, or identify these standards and push them out and be able to see those outliers, come up with this best practice, and then prove to your various business units that that best practice is what you need to put in front of people. And so once again, both these modes are really giving you the individual process execution and achievement, or a strategic transformation that you need to be able to do this. And we've done this for a long time. Software AG has been a big part of helping people to transform with process mining and get insights into their business. And that's with I've been doing it for a long time with Eris, which has been a process mining tool out since I believe the year 2000. So it's been a long time of being able to see these successes. And what I've seen at organizations and the use cases that I've seen them achieve really sticks to me why this is important. Perfect example. I'm not going to name client names today. We're not going to go through sort of all these success cases, but let's talk about just in general what this is. A global IT services corporation that I saw really succeed with mode 1 process mining. So they were looking to deliver services, and they had a lot of highly paid workers doing essentially low value tasks. This is a perfect example of a case for RPA, where you're trying to implement that. But the question is, well, where can we really get the most value out of it? Where should we leverage tools like RPA? And they took a mode 1 look at this. It was an agile project. I mean, it was an IT services corporation. Let's say, because all their resources were very highly paid, for them to do an internal project was also a very expensive and expensive proposition if you were looking to do this long strategic transformation. So, they couldn't convince their executives, and we certainly couldn't convince them to take a lot of people off the bench and put them into this internal improvement process. But if we offered an agile solution, something that was quick and easy, take data sets, give them quick wins that they could use to automate and understand where to improve, well, that was a lot of an easier sell and an easier actual resolution. So once again, we take a look at it, a couple $1 million of savings that they estimated based off of what they were able to achieve. That seems like it's a good savings, but you've seen transformations that save $50, $100 million. That's fine. Those are major transformations. We're not looking at. We're looking at smaller wins that these guys are able to prove out. And in fact, I don't think they ever got to mode 2. They stayed in mode 1. They stayed agile because they knew that they could get all the value they needed off of just getting quick data wins, quick data sets, and then doing an improvement, implementing that new process. And that's been fantastic. And so this is an example of service organizations leveraging their processes and IT investments better using data-driven insights in mode 1. Conversely, I take a look at let's say top 3 international logistics company. So these are once again, we're not using client reference names, but you can figure this out. The point is that they use strategic and end-to-end transformation to talk about moving through the various parts of their supply chain and the logistics. And this was a very challenging one because this was they had a very heavy SLA requirements that were lodged against them by their various B2B customers. And they were looking to improve a supply chain that went through a bunch of different systems. There was a lot of legacy technologies that they were leveraging, plus they were trying to use cloud technologies to sort of speed up some of their back office processes. And ultimately, all that sort of that spider web and that spaghetti of interconnectivity made it very difficult for them to see into their systems. So what we did is we took all that data and we got that, once again, that really important keying. So that's one thing they were very good at. They did have a very good keying system to go between their different systems. So even in the legacy system, they had like a listing of this particular case ID equals this airway bill number. And they underwent a pretty major end-to-end transformation. And talking about reducing cargo delivery time by nearly 50%. And that was through a bunch of things, whether or not it was, they did some major process overhauls at a strategic level. So they eliminated certain systems, they took out business rules and processes. They had a lot of transparency that sort of revealed to them where they were doing legacy processes and using legacy thinking to try and solve tomorrow's problems. That was certainly not working. They also did things like channel management. So they were able to see based off of which systems were hit at which time and which geographies, they were able to better route shipments and use different cross-border efficiencies to get through parts of it. This was a global delivery service organization. So watching, this particular timestamp between country A and country B, we see a higher number here. So if we do a movement of goods through this channel instead, we can see an overall improvement. And they did the massive cost savings were an outcome that was undeniable. And so these are the kinds of and this was a long project. I'll be honest, like this, I think it was 12 to 18 months before they really saw the full value of what was coming through. But once again, if you have executive level support, and they knew that they weren't going to be able to continue to keep up if they were using these old thinking processes, using their old way of approaching challenges. So they used process mining, mode 2 process mining, to make a serious and lasting change to the organization. And they've been able to keep up and excel as a result, partially, of the work that they did in this particular project. And so spending 12 to 18 months and a lot of resource time, they managed to achieve substantial operational and cost savings. And that's what we're trying to help get with process mining. And that's why it's so important to differentiate between mode 1 and mode 2. Know what you're going for and get out there and do it. Don't stop yourself if you don't have all the data. Think about it in an agile capacity. Think about it as mode 1, but understand that you have so much more potential to move up to a mode 2, to get and integrate disparate systems. Or recognize early on that the agile transformation you're trying to undergo spans a bunch of systems, spans a bunch of business units, and involves a huge amount of data that's from disparate sources. You're not going to be able to achieve that in a mode 1. You're going to have to get executive level support. You're going to have to look at longer timelines, but you're going to be able to achieve larger savings. So now you can start to build a better business case. Because once again, ultimately, we're trying to build this transparency. We're trying to help you shape your business and enable your people and enable your customers to be more successful, happier, and move through this whole business execution with ease and without the barriers that come up as a result of operational inefficiencies and operational barriers that come up and get revealed through process mining, both mode 1 in an agile capacity and mode 2 as a strategic transformation enabler. And that's what we want you to do. And Software AG has been doing this for a long time. We've been very successful and very happy, and lots of great customers with it. And we think that this sort of looking at this in a bimodal capacity helps maybe you be successful in that same capacity. So thank you so much for listening to my talk. And this is a great opportunity to speak to everyone. If you have questions, I would like to open the floor. And Jose, thank you for having me in this. I'd like to open it back up and stop presenting, go to my screen only, so we can maybe talk about how all this is working out and how we can see things coming to bear.
That's terrific, JM. What a real masterclass on process mining for value creation. We really appreciate that. That was very, very good. Well done, well communicated.
Thank you.
Lots of questions that have come up here. I will start with kind of the obvious question, which is that came during that your presentation. Mode 1, Mode 2, very important distinction you made there. I think that there's a lot of confusion in the marketplace, and people kind of do hybrids of that. But there's also this tendency, based on the commentary, people share that there's this tendency to think that agile is always better, right? It's agile, so it must be better. I'm quick and nimble, and working with lots of CEOs across many industries, I often hear CEOs talking about technology in not so fun ways. And they, one of the quotes that really stick with me is that one of them used to say all the time that technology can make stupid happen at the speed of light. And that summarizes kind of that agile approach that is sub-optimizing. So the big question is, there is value in both, clearly, but how, when you see organizations that are doing well, how do they balance Mode 1 versus Mode 2? Do they start with Mode 1 and move into Mode 2? Do they do a Mode 2 strategic view and then they do the Mode 1 agile opportunities? There's a mix in the marketplace. What do you see as best practices?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the real truth is that we see a lot of organizations, the ones that are smart or are smart about this, are trying to see quick wins and grow based off of organizational capital that they develop, organizational knowledge. The ones that I see struggle are people who jump both feet in and try to get too much too fast, where they don't have internal resources capable of delivering on the promises that they're trying to put out there. I mean, the truth is that Mode 2 process mining is very hard. It's not like you can just get away with tossing Mode 2 out there and say, oh yeah, we're all good on this. No, it is something that requires executive level commitment, which is hard to achieve. It requires resources internally that have the skills to understand what data is necessary, how to connect that data, and what the insights you're getting out mean. And it requires teams that are able to implement the suggestions, the ideas that come out of the insights you get. Without all three of those, you're just showing dashboards to executives that really mean nothing and don't do anything. But boy, you spent a bunch of cash on a product. Congrats. So organizations really need to take a look internally first. What do we have the organizational capacity to do? Let's be realistic about that. The second piece in this is why organizations that start small and grow from there are much more successful, is what data do we have? What insights can we get, or what information can we get from our systems? And so I go to a lot of organizations that think, oh, we're going to walk into the strategic transformation, and I say, okay, so tell me a little bit more about your systems. What kind of information can I extract from them? They say, well, really, we're looking for you to do that discovery for us. I said, well, what do you mean by that? They said, well, our systems don't really tell us anything about it. Okay, so I say, well, then the first conversation you're having isn't a conversation about process mining. It's really a conversation about robotic process discovery. You're going to want to put like desktop agents, or you're going to want to install sniffers out there into your systems first to get good data. So we're not even going to have this conversation until you can start doing that. And that information comes in really one source at a time. So now we're going to be forced to look at Mode 1, no matter what. And so their goals need to align with the data that they can get out. That's number two. And number three is that you need to think about what your organization's goals are as a transformation. Are you an organization that is willing and open to do major overhauls on end-to-end processes that are enshrined in multiple business units? Do you have the political capital, will, and a really enterprise level strategic transformation goal that's going to align with that? Because that's hard, and that's also not necessarily what organizations want. A lot of times when they're thinking about agile, they're thinking about moving fast, what they're thinking about is exactly the quick wins. And they might think they want to grow and see this multi-business unit, multi-geo execution really, show a big number against their improvement, but that's not what they really want. What they really want, and what their organization is telling them they want, is to see those small wins, and they see those particular KPIs levied against business unit owners. And so don't make a mistake to think that mode 1 is actually small. It's small per execution, but you can implement a program that is agile and spread across to see overall consolidated major transformations and savings, but they need to be specific. You need to have scope for each one of those. And so you need to know your organization, know your data, and know your goals. And if you have all those three things, normally organizations start with a conversation about mode 1 first. There are certain cases, and I've come across a couple where they did jump straight into a strategic conversation. And that's, frankly, a lot of organizations in manufacturing have a much more tight control of it. The one that I talked about, the logistics company, had a really good set of data, and they had a pretty serious history of data science. And so their first conversation was mode 2, but they were ready for it. For the rest of them, I generally think of mode 1 as where we start, but knowing that you can scale up to mode 2 is a really good piece of the puzzle. And it also, don't invest in single serving technology, even if you're thinking agile, because you want that technology to scale. Once again, mode 1 might be little projects, but you add them all up and you've got a huge savings, but only if your technology is able to scale at an enterprise level, even if you're thinking mode 1 to start with.
Excellent answer. Very, very open and honest about what it takes to make this journey successful. And JM, tell me a little bit about you of course understand very well the capabilities that the software provider can deliver to a client. But tell me a little bit on the client side. When you see successful projects, what type of, regardless of, probably there is a difference between mode 1 and mode 2, but if you could summarize a bit, what type of capabilities clients should have in place, the clients that do well have in place or developed as part of this journey? I assume it's a mix of technical and business know-how, but I'd like to hear directly from you. What do you see on the client side that they have a team that has this cross-functional, maybe a set of capabilities, and what do those capabilities may look like?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think there are some common terms that I find when I see this as the lead. So people with backgrounds in things like Six Sigma, people who have a data-driven business analysis. And I feel like that's a weird hybrid combination that has to be explained, because you are looking at the business. Ultimately, you're trying to appeal to your customers. You're trying to be able to support the operations of your company. But people who have a background in engineering and science that recognize the technical requirements to achieve that, but also have the soft skills to push their mandates through agendas through executive management, and the hard skills to interface with technical teams. That's the best capability to have developed. And so that's why we find it a lot in internal consulting teams. We find that a lot in process excellence teams, people who have that sort of focus. If those are the ones who have that background and skills, a deep background in business modeling and business process automation is very, very handy when you start to bridge into process mining, because they'll better understand what they see on the page and be able to say, oh, this is why, and they'll be able to do root cause analysis more easily. But when you have that sort of background, those are teams that are more successful. But the number one success, and particularly in scaling this, that I see it at the level of the CIO or COO, where they have a technical background, particularly around process excellence, where that really senior level executive goes, oh yeah, we need to become a process-driven company, and to do that, I need data, and to do that, I need to get insights from my systems. I understand that, I accept that, I'm willing to put my stamp behind it. Really, executive level commitment is very, very handy to see that really scaled success. you can stay in mode 1 for a while as like an individual team, but the real, like the biggest numbers and the biggest successes I've seen are when that executive level support has a technical background, has a process engineering background, and they're able to really take it and go with it.
Very good. Ladies and gentlemen, I have to say, working with more than 100 cross-industry organizations with accelerating excellence and innovation, and with more than 30,000 excellence and innovation leaders that I have worked with directly, I will say to you that what JM has just talked about and his whole session on mode 1 and mode 2 is a true masterclass on what can create a lot of value in the business. I do not say this lightly, JM. So
Thank you,
really
Jose.
well done in delivering that. There are questions about, is there a way that people can learn more about this mode 1, mode 2 concept, because it intrigued a lot of people. I assume some of this is proprietary. I wonder if there's anything available on your website or any other sources that you could point people to.
I mean, obviously, I would reach out to softwareag.com. That's the company's website that I work for. And I'm M Erlendson. You can reach me. I'm based in North America. So there's a lot of but JM, like jm.erlendson at softwareag.com. Feel free to reach out to me. I can direct you to some resources. But this is from my perspective, this is some emerging thought in the industry. So you don't see a lot of white papers written about it, but it is very much part of what we do and how we present ourselves. So I'd be happy to have a follow-on conversation with you, or if you reach out to softwareag.com, there's a lot of my technical colleagues who can really support that.
This is what it's all about: cross-industry and thought leadership at a global basis. JM, you're doing it. Thank you very much. Terrific session. I appreciate you sharing your wisdom with us.
Have a great day, and thank you so much, everyone, for listening and enjoying what we have to present. This is lots of fun.
Thank you, JM. Ladies and gentlemen, terrific session with JM, and we're going to wrap up this segment now. And at the top of the hour, we're going to have another tremendous practitioner sharing with us her journey of organizational excellence and innovation. Christina Pumphrey, who is Director of Process Engineering at Proqis Engineering, is going to be with us, and she's going to talk about leveraging process mining to design for success, strategic facility and capacity planning. So this is a real industry leader, real organization implementing these tools and techniques in their environment to create value. So I hope to see you at the top of the hour. Again, pleasure to have you with us, and we'll see you back soon.